The Vikings of Burke Island were used to nightly attacks of flaming fireballs. After all, they'd been fighting dragons for 7 generations. One teenager, Hiccup, wasn't a typical Viking. Where most were brawny, Hiccup was brainy. But that didn't stop him from longing to fight dragons like the other teenagers. When he wasn't helping Gobber in the blacksmith's workshop, Hiccup invented weapons to bring down the dragons that attacked nightly. One night, Gobber ordered Hiccup to man the shop as he charged out to join the battle against the dragons. Hiccup realized that this was the perfect opportunity to try out his latest invention, the Mangler. He told himself,
"No one has ever killed a night fury. That's why I'm going to be the first."
If Hiccup could bring down a dragon, he was sure his father, Stoic the Vast, would finally let him join the other teenagers in dragon training. As the dragons rampaged through the village, Hiccup carefully took aim and fired. The Mangler's bola whizzed through the air towards a deadly night fury. Hiccup shouted with amazement.
"Oh, I hit it! Yes, I hit it! Did anybody see that?"
But before Hiccup had the chance to celebrate, a monstrous nightmare chased him through the village. Luckily, Stoic was there to rescue his son. The next day, Hiccup set off in search of the night fury that he had hit. He found the injured dragon lying in the woods, but Hiccup couldn't bring himself to kill it. Hiccup untied the bola from the creature's damaged tail. Suddenly, the mighty beast jumped on Hiccup's chest and let out a huge roar. It could have killed him there and then, but instead, the night fury clumsily flew off. Later, Hiccup came across the dragon in a small cove. He realized he wasn't able to fly properly because of his damaged tail. So he started sketching ideas for a new invention. The more Hiccup thought about the night fury that had spared his life, the more he realized that there must be a lot that Vikings didn't know about dragons. Over dinner that evening, he tried to tell Stoic that he'd changed his mind about wanting to start dragon training. But Stoic had changed his mind too, and told Hiccup that he would start dragon training in the morning. As Stoic left on his latest dragon hunting expedition, Hiccup wondered what he was getting himself into. The next day, the teenagers eagerly entered the dragon training ring. Gobber was the Viking in charge of training. He led a ferocious Gronkel into the ring. It was time to get some practice. The Gronkel let out a stream of fire and nearly toasted Hiccup alive. Luckily, Gobber jerked the dragon's head in time to save Hiccup from his fiery blast. When Hiccup wasn't training, he worked hard making a new mechanical tail for the night fury. But when he tried to attach his invention to the dragon, the big creature flicked his injured tail out of reach.
"Stay with me, buddy. We're good. Just a little bit longer,"
Hiccup pleaded, throwing his leg over the dragon. Suddenly, Toothless rocketed into the sky, pulling Hiccup with him. They shot upwards and wobbled in midair.
"Ah!"
Yelled poor Hiccup as they hurtled over the water, landing in the waves with a massive splash. Hiccup changed his design, and the next time he strapped on the mechanical tail, it worked perfectly.
"It's working!"
cheered Hiccup as they soared through the sky. Meanwhile, training grew harder and harder for the young Vikings. They fought terrible terrors and deadly natters. They battled with axes, swords, and shields. They learned how many shots of fire each dragon had, where to stand, and how to attack. And when training was over, Hiccup made sure nobody saw him as he crept down to the cove to see Toothless. His new friend taught him some dragon facts of his own, like where they enjoy being tickled and which fish they don't like to eat. It was much more fun than fighting. Hiccup used his newfound dragon knowledge to his advantage in the ring. During the next training session, Gobber released a zippleback. Hiccup ran towards the dragon and secretly showed him a smelly eel. The zippleback backed away with a horrified snort while Hiccup grinned. Everyone looked at Hiccup in surprise. None of them guessed what had really happened. Suddenly, Gobber and the teenagers thought Hiccup had power over the dragons. When Stoic returned from his expedition, he heard all about Hiccup's success in the ring. He told Hiccup that he had done a good job tricking Stoic into thinking he was the worst Viking that Burke had ever seen. Hiccup smiled awkwardly as Stoic handed him a huge Viking helmet and explained that it would keep him safe in the ring. Astrid, one of the other teenagers, began to notice that Hiccup spent a lot of time on his own. One day, she followed him to the cove and discovered him with the Night Fury. Hiccup convinced Astrid to go for a ride on Toothless as they flew towards a distant island surrounded by fog. Dozens of dragons were flying towards the island, carrying food they'd stolen from Burke. Suddenly, Hiccup and Astrid saw a monstrous six-eyed beast. It was the Red Death. The teenagers realized that the dragons were feeding the Red Death so he didn't eat them. They'd finally discovered why the dragons attacked their village. On the day of Hiccup's final test for dragon training, his secret friendship with Toothless was revealed. Hiccup watched helplessly as Stoic captured the dragon and dragged him away. Hiccup tried to explain about the dragons.
They raid us because they have to. If they don't bring enough food back, they'll be eaten themselves,
he cried. But Stoic wouldn't listen. Now that Stoic knew about Dragon Island, he was determined to kill every last dragon. Stoic ordered the adults to set sail, forcing Toothless to be his guide. Hiccup quickly gathered the teenagers. He showed them how to feel comfortable around the dragons, and then instructed them how to ride the dragons they'd been taught to fight. If only Stoic had listened to Hiccup before he set sail! The Red Death was like no dragon the adults had ever seen. He crushed their weapons like eggs and blasted holes in their ships. The Vikings were losing the battle. Suddenly, the teenagers swooped to the rescue, riding dragons. Hiccup saved Toothless from Stoic's sinking ship, and the pair bravely fought to defend the adults. Stoic saw that Hiccup had been right all along. The dragons weren't the problem. It was the Red Death who was their real enemy. Hiccup had an idea. After blasting the giant beast's wings full of holes, Toothless and Hiccup flew in front of the dragon so he would chase them. Then they dropped into a nosedive towards the ground. The Red Death followed, gas hissing from his mouth. Toothless let out a fiery blast. The Red Death couldn't stop. He swallowed the flames and exploded as he crashed helplessly to the ground. The Vikings watched in disbelief. Hiccup and Toothless had destroyed the Red Death. But Hiccup's glory came at a price. The long battle was over, and dragons and Vikings were finally free to be friends. Toothless and Hiccup were legends. Now everyone wanted to ride dragons instead of fight them, even Stoic. But flying dragons wasn't as easy as it looked, and Stoic needed plenty of training. Luckily, he had a Viking hero around to teach him. That hero's name was Hiccup. The end.